even though we're all quarantined to our own homes, we can kind of get together and talk about early music and Baroque trumpet a little bit. So just as a couple icebreaker questions to get this party started, I'd like for everyone to kind of go around. I'll start with myself and just say who you are and where you're from and what you're up to. So I'm Jason Dovel. I had the crazy idea to get these people together this afternoon, or this early morning, as the case is for John Foster there, Tuesday morning there in Australia. But I teach at the University of Kentucky in Lexington in the United States.
Will I go next?
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm Anna Freeman. I live in Germany, in Aachen, and I'm at the Hochschule für Musik Köln, or the University for Music in Cologne, in Germany. And I'd just like to thank Jason very much for the invitation. That's great to get together. And I'm not doing anything else at the moment anyway, so thank you.
Josh?
So I go, okay, I go?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, good. So I am Gabrieli Cassone from Italy. I live in Novara, is a town quite near to Milan. I teach in the conservatory and I play around Italy, Europe, sometimes outside. Now, no concert for the moment, so teaching with Skype and this type of thing. I'm very happy to do this meeting with you.
I'm Josh Cohen. I live right outside of Washington, D.C. I play in a bunch of groups all over North America, and I also teach privately and have a full-time job teaching K4 through 4th grade students at the Edlin School in Reston, Virginia.
Great. Hi, I'll go next. It's John Foster here. I'm in Sydney, Australia. And I play Baroque trumpet and still play some modern trumpet as well. And I play, lots of all the groups here and tour a little bit in America and Europe. And keeping myself busy, doing a few Skype lessons and that kind of thing, as well as I was saying to my colleagues before, playing lots of golf at the moment. So there's always a little silver lining when these pandemic strike.
My turn, I'll go. So
okay,
I'm Barry Baugus, and I live in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina. And I play Baroque trumpet and modern trumpet and do some teaching. And also own the Baroque trumpet shop. And so at least people are still buying trumpets now. Mostly music and mouthpieces, but they are buying some trumpets.
And I'm Freeman Immer. I'm living in Cologne, Germany, or close to Cologne, Germany. I mainly freelance Baroque trumpet player since more than 40 years now. I think I'm quite old. I teach in Cologne Hochschule since for 36 years, and I had been teaching in Amsterdam for 20 years and played with different groups, orchestras like Freiburg Baroque Orchestra, and what's very important for me, I played 20 years first trumpet with Nikolaus Hanuk in the Concertos in Vienna. And now I'm in quarantine at home and teaching via Skype or Zoom and practicing a little bit, and so try to relax.
Great. Thanks everyone for being here. And since each of our participants see these Hollywood squares in a different order, if we can sort of more or less stay with that order in answering questions, that might make for a somewhat of an organization. So another easy question, can everyone just state what they use as kind of their primary instrument when they're playing Baroque trumpet? What is the main, like for me, I play an Egger historic model with 3 holes is what I play. So what do you play, Anna?
Well, I'd like to actually rephrase the question. I think it's probably what instruments you play, because
Sure.
Crossing between my old favorite, which I got from Ed Tarr in 1977, in Basel. He gave me a Meinl Laube, an old Meinl Laube, and I'm still playing that. It's my old favorite. It's like wearing a nice, comfortable shoe, and it's great for solo work. It's 3 holes and terrific for technical stuff. But in the past years, I've been getting more and more into playing actually natural trumpet, especially a circular trumpet. And so I have had an instrument maker here make me one. That's Marcus Leuchter, and he made me a nice circular trumpet. And I practice that, and I hope to get better and better at it at my age. I'm still young, so that's okay.
Okay, I play normally the 3-hole Egger, but I also play a no-hole trumpet every day. When I start playing, I start normally with the Fontini Sonata on no-hole trumpet, and this instrument is a very strange thing because I made it on the workshop myself, except the bell. The bell is a Baroque bell by Bob Barclay. And then the third instrument I play is a key trumpet made by my good friend Günther Head. That's a key trumpet, normally in E flat, but also in D, with 5 keys. That's the instruments I played. And I also have my old Meinl Laube, and I still love it and play it sometimes.
Yeah, great instrument.
So it's me, right? Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I am very lucky because I play instrument made by Christian Bosch. He was a student of mine and is living not far from here. And I find very good to collaborate with him to make trumpets. And he can play the trumpet very, very well. So he knows how is the trumpets, and then he can try trumpets when he's making. And I play mostly 4 holes long model by him, Christian Bosch. I play also key trumpet made by him. I play F trumpet, rotary valve, E flat. Yes, mostly play these instruments. I play often also the modern trumpet. So I have one Courtois at the moment, and I play also BNDES and all the stuff.
I play a Norwich natural trumpet made by Matt Martin. I just started playing those about 3 years ago. All of my keys have a pigtail loop. I really like the resistance that it gives. And that's pretty much I have an Egger as well that I use when I have 2 trumpets, like a Mozart Requiem or something, and I have to switch quickly. And I love that horn too. I've just gotten really used to the Norwich trumpet, and it plays really well for me. And I have a mouthpiece made by Pickett. That is a copy of an Egger S7 from the 70s, which is not the same as an S7 from now. It's much different, and I really liked it. I had Pickett copy it for me and make it in a 2-piece way so I could switch the shanks sometimes from a tapered shank and also a smooth bore shank. And then the only other thing that I play that's different is I have one mouthpiece that I use for just F trumpet. I only use it for F trumpet. That's a little bit smaller and shallower, but still basically the same kind of mouthpiece.
Okay.
Go, John.
Oh, sure. I have a whole bunch of different trumpets I use, and so it's quite a long list, but basically I've been, quite involved, like Friedemann as well, and like Gabriel in consultation with making a few different design instruments. But the one I'm actually using now is kind of he's the most is kind of a hybrid. It has bits and pieces from all different horns. But I've been through all the brands. I had a Foster model Naumann, and I had a Norwich before, and I've had Matthew Parker's. I've had just some original bells that I found that I've added to things because I like the sound of them. I have a keyed trumpet of my own design that I really enjoy playing on. And like Josh as well, I've worked with Peter Pickett on a Baroque trumpet mouthpiece, and I find that's really great. And and it comes with a couple of different shanks, so I can change the size of for different receivers of different instruments. And as well as that, I come over most years to the States and do a show with Vinnie DiMartino called Sound the Trumpets, and we use about 30 instruments in 2 hours, which does everything, because I also play cornetto as well. So it does everything from like the didgeridoo, every type of indigenous horn, ethnomusicological instrument you can think of, right the way through up to modern jazz. So there's a whole bunch of historical cornets in there and 19th century stuff as well, slide trumpets, all sorts of things. So yeah, it's a bit extensive, but anyway, that's an idea.
So I normally play a Kovacs model 4-hole trumpet made by Egger. And then if I'm traveling a lot, and here in the U.S. it's sort of a pain to fly these days, and I guess it is everywhere. Well, now you can't fly anyways, but it doesn't make any difference. But I use a 3-hole Egger if I'm traveling a lot on planes, just because it'll fit in the case and fit under the seat, so I don't get hassled all the time. They're both MDC models, which is the Nuremberg brass models of Eggers. And I really like the new Kovacs model. It's a really neat horn, but I switch back and forth. It doesn't make much difference. And last year I just bought I found a Courtois 1850 low F trumpet with all the crooks, and I've been really enjoying playing that too. So
great.
It was a good find.
Yeah, it was.
The next question I was going to ask, some people have already started answering this one a little bit. One of the questions I get a lot as a teacher from students interested in Baroque trumpet is, should I buy a 3-hole? Should I buy a 4-hole? Should I buy a no-hole? So do you have a I want to ask everyone, do you have a preference for a 3-hole versus 4-hole versus no-hole? And if so, why do you have a preference for the horn that you use?
Okay, let me start. I prefer the 3-hole because of when I started to play this, it was the only instrument. When I started to play Baroque trumpet, there was only the 3-hole. I think it was the time when Michael Laird invented the 4-hole, and so that's why I started 3-hole, and I still love it. I think the 3-hole is for Baroque music, from sound and everything, is a little better than the 4-hole. The 4-hole is better for classical music. For me personally, I sometimes also play 4-hole, and of course the no-hole trumpet is it's the original instrument. There's no question, and we all should play the no-hole. But the 3-hole is for me the instrument I started with, and I developed a little bit with Egger. And this new 3-hole I developed with Egger, with MDC, and so that's a perfect instrument for me. That's it.
Okay, I'll jump in if no one else wants to go. Well, having come through the English system and studying at Royal College, of course, everyone in England just played on the long model on the 4-hole trumpet, and I started with Michael Laird, so it was a great system to learn on, because of course in the top octave you get every accidental with a vent hole to cover, so it saves having to sort of bend a lot of the notes, which of course Bach writes for, so from that point of view, I think sound-wise I have no preference between a 3-hole trumpet and a 4-hole trumpet. I think the player is the sound, and I did toured extensively with Niklas Eklund when he was really in his prime, and I heard back the recordings, and really it matches so well. And he was playing 3-hole, I'm playing 4-hole, so really I think working on your perception of sound is the most important thing, because of course it's just tubing and a bell. There's some response issues between the 3- and 4-hole instruments that are slightly different, but once again, if you're playing stylistically with the right approach and you're playing the right ball size and these kind of things, it really, I can't see that there should be a huge difference. The only thing from an ergonomic point of view, obviously the 4-hole trumpet for some people with shorter arms and smaller hands can be sometimes an issue, but of course, like anything, there's always ways around these things with positioning of the holes and things. But interestingly, and I think it's a relevant time to bring it up, given that Professor Dr. Edward H. Tarr has just left us, and he was such an amazing contributor to the topic we're talking about today, all things Baroque trumpet. When I interviewed Ed, not so long ago, and I asked him about his first encounters with Meinl and Lauber and Rainer Egger and these sort of things, and asked him about the 3-hole trumpet, he actually insisted that the 3-hole trumpet, which of course was started off by Otto Steinkopf with the Finke trumpet, the 3-hole system was developed. He said actually that the reason for the extra wrap, and that was purely an ergonomic reason, so that the instrument could be held in a comfortable position. So, which makes a lot of sense to me, because you want it, the more comfortable it is, and of course the instrument is the same length, so that doesn't matter, but it makes a lot of sense to me to have it in somewhere comfortable to hold. So really, I think the 3-hole, 4-hole, preference thing is a little bit of a moot point these days, based on the high level that both instruments are played on. Personally, I think, I'd like to see more people playing with no holes. As Friedemann said, it's a very, very traditional way that the trumpet was used. But yes, certainly I play 4-hole trumpets, but then quite often I play hand-stopped trumpets, slide trumpets, so, all sorts of things. So, you have to be able to play everything these days.
I'll go ahead now. Well, and thanks, John. That's good that you said that about Ed, because I don't have to talk about it so much there. But as I mentioned before, in 1977, when I started with Ed, that was the only thing that was around, apart from a very old Meinl Lauber, which he had, a long model, which he gave me to start off on while I was waiting for my 3-hole instrument. And so I started that for about the first half of the year that I studied with him. And after that, I got a 3-hole. But after that, I think that was about the only thing that was around at the time. And at that time, you have to consider that nothing else was going on with instrument making. And people were trying to introduce the trumpet as being a respectable instrument within the orchestra, trying to convince conductors and trying to convince audience that this was worthwhile taking further for people to study or people to play. So I think that was a good solution for that time anyway. And since then, it's moved on. So, and that's why I think that it's still a very good solution for playing music, because it is an easier way to approach the repertoire as well. Because if you are battling against playing without holes or doing other things with the instruments, with slides, etc., I think that that can hinder a student, especially to getting on with repertoire, learning things like articulations or learning ornamentation or improvisation, for instance, as well. So to answer the question about 3, 4 holes or no holes, I think that basically all are good. I've tried everything. I've tried echo instruments. I've tried lots of different sorts of things. But in the end, I think that for me, if I'm asked to play a piece, I still feel most comfortable playing a 3-hole. But for me personally at home, when I'm practicing, I try practicing every day without holes, playing Fantini sonatas or whatever else, going through the whole Purcell repertoire, which is not too difficult and good to learn without playing holes.
I have to be honest, I played all of these instruments. I started with a 4-hole TV, And then I went from that to a 3-hole Egger, and then I went back to a 4-hole. And the reason I went back to a 4-hole is I found that the figurations and the mechanics of going between 16th notes, especially back and forth between C, D, and E, for me is easy to toggle like this, as opposed to not really having anything for a D on a 3-hole instrument is being closed all the time. And on a 4-hole instrument, you can either open it if it's a really good horn, or you could half-hole it, or you could play it closed. And I just like the amount of options that I had to be able to do that. And going along with what John said, is some of the upper register, the B flats, the really high B flats, you can make them sharper with different holes with the 4-hole that you can't really do, at least I couldn't do on a 3-hole instrument, as well as G sharps also, and just, you know, even low B. I mean, there are a bunch of things that I could do on a 4-hole instrument. I could even play low chorale melodies somehow on a 4-hole instrument, you know, using the holes to help, but I could not ever do that on a 3-hole instrument. So for me, technically, it's just easier to make things cleaner on a 4-hole instrument for me. But I agree also with John about the sound. Is, you know, you hear what Friedemann, what all you guys who play 3-hole instruments do is just as clean as whatever anyone else does. But for me to do it, it wasn't as easy to make it clean. So that's why I eventually just said 4-hole for me, because I could do more. I could make things sound easier and appear not to be struggling with some of the high stuff in the intonation wise. It's easier for me.
Yeah, I started out with a no-hole trumpet. Actually, it was my first trumpet, and it was made by Ron Collier. And
I played one of those.
Well, mine wasn't bad. It wasn't very good, but it wasn't bad. And I remember I started in 1985 with that. Then I went to grad school and studied with Fred Holmgren, and then I got my Meinl Lauber 3-hole. So, and then I played in Philharmonia with Fred for 15 years. And we went back and forth between playing 4 holes, 3 holes, then back to 3 holes, then back to 4 holes. And I still do like to play natural trumpet whenever I can. And I have played, the hardest thing I ever played, I did a B minor mass about 3 years ago. Luckily it was in Alabama, so nobody heard it, but it was the hardest thing I've done on a no-hole trumpet. And I have 2 really nice Egger natural trumpets. I have one with a Haspel and one with a Noggle, and the Noggle's a wonderful trumpet. But yeah, but after starting out with no holes, I decided I actually might want to like buy a house one day and make money. So that's when I got my my 3-hole trumpet after that. So.
Great. Would anyone like to add anything to that? I think everyone answered.
I'd just like to add one last thing, is that for the students out there or whatever, I mean, a lot of my students through my trumpet academy and things, of course they don't have the money when they're studying to buy instruments, and of course we don't have a Baroque trumpet maker of any reputation here in Australia, so we're a little bit isolated, so we have to import instruments. It gets very expensive. So I've made dozens of what I call my Johnstrosities, which are essentially just bits and pieces and banged together natural trumpets for them to learn on. But it's very interesting how effective even that is. And I'd encourage everyone both to lend their hands to trying to work out how to build an instrument, but also then just, no one ever sees a Van Hove for the first couple of years, and it really gives a great foundation to the rest of their playing. The other thing I'll say is I'm just glad, and I'm sure you'll all agree, that none of us had to start learning on this instrument that Rainer Egger made for Ed.
Oh, God.
That looks like a nightmare, doesn't it? I think they made 4 of them. Maybe Anna, maybe you got to play on those, but I saw 4 of them hanging up in Eggers one day and got talking to them, and they just look incredible. They've got clarinet keys and all holes and keys and
no, I only got the 1 hole. I only got the 1 hole one. It looks similar to that, yeah.
May I tell you one thing? My first Baroque trumpet teacher was Walter Holy, And Walter was the very, very first. He was the first before Ed. He started to play the Baroque trumpet. At that time, it was named Clarino. It was a curled Finke trumpet. I have one of those. They was in the 50s. He started to play this in the 50s. And the thing, this instrument is terrible. The only thing original is the length of the tube. The bell is smaller than a piccolo bell, and the measurement is nothing. The size of mouthpiece is a piccolo mouthpiece, and it's. I think if you drive with a car over that trumpet, the car is damaged. And, but the story was that they tried to play a natural trumpet with that holes, and it was completely out of intonation for them because they had no idea how this worked with bending the notes. And then they looked at this picture, at the painting of Reiche, and how Reiche holds his fingers. They thought there must be something under his fingers. And then Walter Holy with Otto Steinkopf and Helmut Finke, they tried to find out what maybe, and this was the way how the three-hole system was invented, on a curled Finke trumpet. And then later, I know that Michael Laird also studied with Walter Holy, and then he said, okay, it must be possible to make a long instrument, and then he invented the four-hole trumpet. The four-hole trumpet is a three-hole trumpet with the two finger holes are the same, plus where we have the three-hole trumpet, we have one finger, the thumb for F and A, and with the four-hole you have two holes for these two notes. And the story how the three-hole trumpet came is from the picture or the painting of Gottfried Reiche, and it's from the 50s. It's really old. And the first recordings you can hear, by example, the first recording of the Brandenburgs with Harnoncourt was played by Walter Holy, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic how this works. It's interesting to play an instrument like this, these old ones. It had nothing to do, the sound is nothing like the instruments we have today, but it's still working.
Can I just be cameraman again? There's that picture of Riker there with where he's holding the instrument. Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Such great information. You guys are treasure trove of trumpet history. So for the next three questions, I just want to do like a quick show of hands. We have a lot of folks tuned in on Facebook Live. Many of them are modern trumpet players who are maybe interested. So I'm just curious, could you please raise your hand if more than 50% of the work you do in music is on period instruments? More than 50% of the work you do is on period instruments. Okay, most of you. Raise your hand if more than 75% of your work is on period instruments. Okay, and if more than 90% of your work is on period instruments? Wow, so for those of you out there who have ambition of doing early music, there are 4 folks here who 90% of what they do or more. I think Josh earlier said exclusively all that you do, Josh, is early music, right?
Except for Easter, which didn't happen this year.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
I'm a professional golfer these days.
So the next kind of round of questions are pedagogy questions. I think all of us teach in some respect. So what books do you like to use when you're teaching or even in your personal practice, specifically to Baroque trumpet? Like what books do you like to use? What resources?
Well, I use Ed's books, all three of them, and I use Anna's books. And I haven't seen your new one yet. I just ordered some. So
Right.
There it is. There's Anna's new book. Yep. And I have a lot of my students just play through a lot of repertoire. I mean, orchestral repertoire and solo repertoire. I think that's as good as anything. So, but I do like Anna's books and Ed's books for those.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, for me, I like the 3 books of Ed Tarr and the Duvernay also, more exercises, and then I like to practice also with mouthpiece. I register something with the Baroque trumpet. And for some, I play also modern trumpet, and my students play mostly both. I have some students that play only Baroque trumpet. So I like to do stuff like bending and other a lot of bending with the modern trumpet, a lot of bending with the Baroque trumpet too, and repertoire, of course.
Anna?
I just wanted to say that, well, actually, my main job is teaching modern trumpet, actually, at the Hochschule. So that's teaching bachelor and master students, either orchestral or solo and chamber music. And but that's where I've actually had to, the whole time that I played Baroque trumpet, it was a choice for me to do modern trumpet as well as teaching. So and then I thought it would be great to adapt James Stamp's methods and Earldie Irons. I don't know if you probably know Irons, the Irons methods, and to sort of try and fit that into learning how to play the Baroque trumpet. And so therefore, those of you that know the first book, which I wrote, that includes that sort of stuff, that sort of material, putting those ideas into that. So as well as that sort of thing, I use also the Duvernay, which is what I started on in Basel all those years ago. And in fact, I had to, it insisted on me just playing that for about 6 months. I was just doing these low Duvernay, the 100 etudes, until it was all really perfectly set. And then I was allowed to go into the Colorino register only after that. And so that's great. And I think that for me, it's important to not only do those sort of things, but to also go through the repertoire of Bach, Purcell, Handel, these books of complete repertoire, and just to test myself out with those sort of things. And of course, as Friedemann said before, Fantini are fantastic exercises, I think, especially for natural trumpet, to learn how to play fluently. And that's an important part, I think, of playing any of the sort of trumpets with the three holes or 2 holes, is to learn how to blow it first. And if you're not concentrating on the air, only the air, I think, then it can be a distraction. So therefore, I think for me, learning to blow the air first through playing a natural trumpet, and that is very easy to learn when you're playing the Fantinis. And then my sort of thing that I do, which is a little bit crazy, I go through my whole library, which is a pretty big library, and I go through all my solo works. So it takes, and you can imagine it takes a long time, but it's a good exercise to do. So, yeah.
Anna, how long, when you say you go through the library, you mean like on a daily basis or over the course of a month, you know?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah. No, as long as my chops last, and then
Sure. Friedemann?
I normally work myself and with my students on Duvernay, 100 exercises. Not all of them, of course, but the first page and a little of the second page where the octave jumps are coming. That's a very good thing. And then I have my own exercise. That's a bending exercise where I play, I drive the notes, high word from, by example, the B flat to A, or the C to B, or the D to C sharp, without holes on a no-hole instrument or on the 3-hole, but all these exercises are without holes. And then I work with literature. So either Bach cantatas, Handel, Purcell or so, or with solos, and make my own exercises from this, and develop the exercises with the students. By example, if you play Bach Cantata 51, you can make of the first 2 bars, you can make 10 exercises only from this few figures. And so I invent exercises and I tell the students, please make your own exercises. because of for me it's not so good that I have the same program every day, because then I don't concentrate in the important things. So what I do is I do the things I need on that day, because every day is different. One day I can play without warming up, everything works, and the next day I need an hour warming up. And this is something, yeah, I don't like these fixed things. I have Fantini every day, and I like this Schmelzer Sonata Op 5 is fantastic. Then I play a little Haydn trumpet concerto on key trumpet, and sometimes when I'm in quite good shape, I play Michael Haydn and this stuff. And I make my own exercises from this. But also, of course, Ed's book is fantastic, especially the first book where he speaks about the unequal tonguing. That's when I have seen this book the very first time, I immediately phoned Ed and said, because of this page 30 with unequal tonguing, it's worth to buy the book. Only because of this one page. It's page 30, Dresden. Tara, 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 tara. That's it. So it's always yeah, a lot of things.
Anyone else?
Sure. I mean, I have to, of course, mirror the sentiments of our other colleagues and say that obviously Ed's book's fantastic, and particularly, you know, some of the intonation exercises when you're practicing with someone, and some of the ensemble stuff in the third volume is invaluable to our literature, so that's really fantastic. Of course, I use my own method, just in case you've forgotten what that looked like. And anyway, and really my method, where that comes from, is basically my studies with Michael Laird and a few other people in England, and various other people I studied with. And it's really just a continuation of that style of approaching the 4-hole trumpet and 3-hole trumpet and the natural trumpet, because everything in my book I practice without holes. And then I like to come back later and then add the holes, and it feels a lot simpler. And it's what Anna was talking about. It's more about controlling the air and learning how to blow the instrument the right way, and then you're able to use the tool far more effectively, because of course the trumpet itself is not the instrument. So that's always what I try and remind myself. I also do some Dalvenet, first few pages, and the intervallic things, and the broken up pitches and things, and use them also just to, and some of my own exercises, lots of running notes, just to work on the unequal articulation, practice different styles of articulations. Some of the scalic things that I use to expand with, I would say, are very influenced by Chikowitz flow study exercises. So we're just basically, we're not utilizing the whole range of the instrument all the time, but we're gradually building up to more and more and more. So we're always trying to expand. And then, of course, just general repertoire all the time. I'll always pull out a book for a student and make sure they can really cover well, with good sound and intonation and articulation and principale things. And if I'm teaching, and a good way to do it with those books, I'll always try and overlap the lessons by 15 minutes, so that way there's always 3 of us in the room at one time for a few minutes, and then I can get out the repertoire books and we can work as 3 parts, and each take turns at covering all the parts. Anyway, that's it for me.
Anyone else?
I'm with Barry. I like to do a lot of repertoire stuff that you're more likely to play in being hired for a concert. Like the easier stuff first, water music, Handel's Suite in D, certainly not something like B minor mass right away, but some of the easier repertoire, some of the classical repertoire on just, getting tonic and dominant set in your ears. But yeah, the tar books are terrific. I mean, they're really good too. But I mainly do repertoire when I have Baroque trumpet students. We go over things that you're most likely to to have to play for real.
Since we're on the topic of repertoire, methods, and instruments, I should mention that Barry Baugus is the owner of the Baroque Trumpet Shop, which you can find at baroquetrumpet.com. And that's, you can find just about any kind of instrument or repertoire you want there. That's a great resource. I know that's the first person I always call when I'm looking for repertoire or instruments. So if you're looking to get an instrument or get started with some of these resources that people have been mentioning, you can get a lot of those through Barry. And if you want to get resources directly from some of these authors that have mentioned, like Anna and John, you can, of course, contact those people as well. Some people have already mentioned some of this already, but it would be cool to kind of go around and just tell who was kind of your most important influence or teacher in learning the Baroque trumpet. I'll just start for me. Keith Johnson, when I was a student in North Texas, basically introduced me to Baroque trumpet. That's when I bought a Baroque trumpet. But then after I graduated, I did 3 summers with Barry Baugus at the Oberlin Conservatory Baroque Performance Institute when he taught there. And Barry knows everything. He knows, he's forgotten more than I'll ever learn about Baroque trumpet. And he was a great teacher for me and a great resource. And so thanks for joining us, Barry.
Thank you.
Thanks for being my teacher.
Well, I studied with Fred Holmgren long time ago at NEC.
We were the only 2 students of his, there at NEC.
I know. Of course, I've listened to all of you, like, Friedemann, Anna, Anna, Gabriel. I've been listening to you. Crispian, obviously, was an influence on me growing up. I even named a cat after him. I had a Persian cat named Crispian, and actually a dog named Perkins. But yeah, after I got out of NEC and I went to McGill for my graduate school, my technical teacher was Douglas Kirk, who was a cornetto player, and he handed me a cornetto for a week, and I handed it right back to him because I couldn't. There's too many holes, too many things for me to do, and I wanted to do one thing very well. So I ended up really learning most of the stuff in graduate school from violinists and oboists, and listening to how they phrase things and how they sing through their instrument. And that was a huge influence for me as far as when I was really developing how to get my own sound and my own style, is listening to other instruments that weren't trumpet, and hearing what they do and how they make phrases go from one place to the next. And that's helped me a lot, I think, not always thinking like a trumpet player at all, because, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I wanted to sing and not just be loud, So.
Yeah.
I guess my first influence was listening to those Ed Tarr solo recordings when I was an undergrad. And my second one was actually listening to Harlem Trumpet Consort with Friedemann's group. And that was a big influence on me. And then I studied with Fred Holmgren and went to New England and the conservatory also, and studied with Fred. And Crispian's been a big influence on my playing too. So we're good friends. And haven't seen Crispian in a while, but
I heard someone told me he had a heart attack.
Oh.
Like in December, but he's okay. I hope he's okay.
Yeah.
So,
Anna?
Me? Yeah.
No.
So I had no teacher when they started to play the Baroque trumpet. I was already first trumpet in the chamber orchestra, and then I decided to play the Baroque trumpet. And then the reason when I really studied more is because a concert of you, Freeman, in Milan, when you played the Brandenburg many years ago, I hear this sound. I say, oh, I want. Now, in this moment, I decided to dedicate more time. and to try to have this sound. I didn't succeed to have this good sound like him, or like you, but was the influence, of course, that all the work Edward Tarr did with the edition and especially history, the books he wrote, and then the Dos Meters book also make me very curious about history and what is all this music written not for the piccolo but for another strange instrument so long. So listening all the orchestras and trumpeters more. I didn't have a teacher at this time, but I learned a lot from listening trumpeters on concert, and especially a lot with colleagues with oboe, violin, flute, and this kind of player. Especially play with the Zephyr Ensemble. It's an Italian group with my friend Alfredo Bernardini and Grazzi, oboes, bassoon. I learned very much from them. They was very kind with me because I was there to play with a modern style, articulation, not very, we can say Baroque on the style, and then listening to them was very good. It was very nice for me. Also listening with Giovanni Antonini with the flute and with flauto dritto and this special articulation. So I learned a lot listening with others. At this time was good for me.
Okay, I think my first teacher was, of course, a modern trumpet teacher, and he took me with him when I was 17 to play gigs with him. Of course, we played a Christmas story on 3 Monkey D trumpets, D rotary valve trumpets, and I learned quite a lot from him. And then later, I had lessons with Walter Holy. He was my teacher when I started in Cologne, but Walter had a totally different idea of playing Baroque music like I had, and so I learned more how to play the Hindemith Sonata from him, like play Bach. I had some colleagues that had a very big influence of me. Very special Helmut Hucke. He was an oboe professor in Cologne, and he was one of the old Baroque oboe players. And he helped me a lot with interpretation and with everything. And of course, for trumpet players, I think we should not forget good old Maurice Andre, because he had a good influence of all on me, and I think on nearly all of us, from his musicology and his way of playing. Of course, not really Baroque, but he was a great player, and his Haydn is still fantastic. Haydn and Hummel is still fantastic, how he played this. And then, but the man who influenced me most was Nikolaus Harnoncourt. This 20 years playing with him in his group, and I played a lot of cantatas, Bach cantatas, and all the Bach things, a lot of Handel and Purcell and Haydn, Mozart, and so this was, he was my musical father. He was absolutely brilliant, and he knew so much about, not only about music, he knew everything or everything about all instruments. He knew everything about everything. So he was absolutely cosmopolitan, and he was the man who influenced my musical life most.
Anna, I think you had your hand up a moment ago.
Yes. I think that my influences were actually, there were a couple of really important influences for me. When I first studied in Melbourne, there was a lecturer in historic music there, and actually an organist, and he was fantastic with old music, and he first introduced me to Quantz, the flute method from Quantz. And that has everything in it, as far from articulations to ornamentation to improvisation, everything. And for me, that was an eye-opener into a really completely different world of playing. And well, apart from the world I came from brass bands. And before starting at the college, the thing is that I was influenced by, well, a neighbor actually gave me a couple of records. And one was Maurice Andre of the Albinoni, some of these things which I'd never heard. I'd only heard brass band music. And then the other one was Ed's recording, or that wasn't only Ed's recording, of the Altenburg with Robert Bodenröder. I think Walter Holly was on that too, Friedemann, yeah. And I think it was fantastic. That really was fantastic. And I fell in love with the sound of the Baroque trumpet. And then I made up my mind I wanted to do that. And that was even before I started studying. And then I found out about all of these strange articulations and ornamentation, and so I had to do that as well. And luckily, John O'Donnell, the organist, he said, well, why don't you go to Switzerland to study with Ed Taub? And I said, well, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And that's where I ended up, and it led from there, which I ended up doing lots of stuff with Ed for many years. So, and I learnt so much from him. And also my other big influences, I said, was Maurice Andre. But also, I think that in America, there was Gerard Schwartz. And I don't know if he still plays or not. I think he conducts now. And but fantastic piccolo trumpet playing, and especially his cornet playing, just really fantastic. So for me, that sort of playing was brilliant. I think also having influences from other musicians was a really big thing for me, and to work with really good conductors like, Franz Bruggen, and conductors and musicians, Franz Bruggen, Nicholas Annenkow. When I was in Zurich, I did a few things with him, and Gustav Lehnhardt. So, not to forget a famous German horn player, Hermann Baumann, and he visited the college in Melbourne many years ago, and talked about playing natural horn and blowing and things like that, and that really gave me a lot of insight into how to play the natural trumpet as well.
Ooh. And just a quick question for you. So when you started with playing a lot with Ed, was that also with Marc Ulrich in the group?
Marc did sometimes. I used to do, we did a couple of tours of Japan with Ed, doing but with Bo Nelson.
Oh, Bo Nelson, all right. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so Ed Bo Nelson and I, we did quite a lot of tours and around Europe, and Ed was very kind to me. We did lots of duo concerts in all over the place as well. So, but I was involved in recordings and stuff like that. He really took me under his arm and showed me a completely different life, and I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't because of his influence.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was really great. Yeah.
So I already. You go, Friedemann. Go.
Just a little story. I remember one thing. I was playing with Hanako in Vienna, a Bach cantata. I think it was Aeolus cantata. And 5 minutes before the concert, 3 guys entered the backstage, and that was Ed, Boo, and you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that was amazing. It was a great concert.
Well, I think I already touched on some of my background with the people that I was most influenced by, being, Michael Laird was really the big one for me. I think he first met Walter Holley in 1964, and then he came back, as Friedemann mentioned, to England, and I think he was playing with Don Smithers in this Clarino consort, playing the little Finca trumpets, with as well with Ian
Wilson.
With Ian Wilson, that's right. And so that that was still very pioneering stuff at that time, I think. even though it was sort of a funny little horn instrument. No one really knew in England what to do with that instrument. And that's when Michael sort of had the idea to make a cavalry-style long trumpet, and the rest is history. But basically everyone in England who plays Baroque trumpet now has studied with Michael Laird at some point. And he's a very inspirational guy, and he always had a wonderful way with his students to make them feel incredibly important. And he always would play in the lessons, and he had such a special sound. You only ever needed to hear one note from Mike Laird and you knew instantly who it was. And so he was one of those special people for me that gave me a lot of self-belief from the time we spent together. And, even now, many years later, I can contact him anytime, and he's still got those great words of advice. The other people for early music, once again, it's not really early music, but when I was a very young boy, Maurice Andre was a huge idol. I was, by age about 12, I was completely addicted to his playing and his sound. And of course, it at least gave me some idea of Baroque literature, or it made me curious about Baroque literature and about the genre anyway, enough that held me in good stead for later on. Some of Mike's other students, like Marc Bennett, when I was studying in England, he was really playing so phenomenally well at the time, and I also studied with him. And it was just, you could just be near Marc at that time, like through osmosis, and your playing would improve because he was just playing so well around then. I spent a little bit of time around David's staff, which was very nice. And I spent a lot of time, playing with Crispian. And that's always a pleasure because he's such a great man and a great human being, and just has a wonderful style and approach to the Baroque trumpet, which is just kind of so efficient and most of the time absolutely flawless. I have to tell just one story, if I may indulge myself. So I got Michael Laird and Crispian to come over for my concert series in Sydney. This is probably about 10 years ago now. And Crispian had a very bad connection with his flights. So he had about more than 30 hours in transit to get to Australia. And I picked him up at 8 a.m. from the airport. I had to take him for a 10 a.m. rehearsal. And he was soloist with my orchestra. He had to play about 8 things on the program. He had to play Leopold Mozart, this, that, some stuff with singers. He was doing Stradella. He was doing, lots of heavy lifting. And he got from the airport, picked him up. He looked like fresh as a daisy. I drove him to the rehearsal. Within 5 minutes, he's got the entire orchestra laughing and eating out of the palm of his hand. We had the rehearsal from 10 till 1. I don't think he missed a single note the whole time. And it sounded absolutely brilliant, like he was in his best form. And we played right till 4 o'clock. Absolutely remarkable playing. And then I'm thinking, this guy's sort of not human, to have this sort of stamina after a long flight. Anyway, by about 10:30 that night, I had to go to bed because he was wearing me out. He's just a great guy. And if he's out there, I miss you, buddy. And hope to see you soon.
Great. What wonderful stories. I'd like to ask a couple of... Oh, Friedemann, go ahead.
One little story. Barry mentioned the Harlem Trumpet Consort CD or LP we did in, 80-something.
84.
84. And this was a fantastic thing. I had enough money to invite some players, and I remember this was the only time I played together with Michael Laird and Crispian and Ralph Bryant. Ralph, and my brother was also, and this was a brilliant time. And Dick Lister was playing trombone, and some of them don't live anymore. But I remember this, the recording, and I remember when we recorded Altenburg, I asked Crispian, can you please play a second trumpet, second choir? That's the one with the high E at the end. And he said only, if you want to have it, you can have it. It was funny. It was a great time we had together with these guys.
One other thing people may not know about Crispian is when he was a young man, he actually made it to the semi-finals of Junior Wimbledon. So he
Wow.
was
Oh, really?
he had lots of talents. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Wow, I'm learning so much from this. This is great. So a couple of questions about students, and then I'll look at the Facebook Live here, and we'll take a few. We've got quite a few questions on our Facebook Live feed, so we'll get to some of those. But let's go to a couple of our questions I'd emailed our panel in advance. The next question is, are there any common problems you find with a new Baroque trumpet player or a young student who's learning a Baroque trumpet? Just common problems or common solutions you might have for a beginner.
If I may start, I think every player, modern trumpet player, is influenced by the modern trumpet and by the interpretation of modern players. And I think it's very interesting to learn that the Baroque trumpet is something else. It's not just another trumpet. The longer I play Baroque trumpet, the more I learn it's not beside the piccolo and B flat and E flat and so another trumpet. It's a special instrument. And so it's a totally different sound. It's a totally different way of articulation, of interpretation, even and of tempo. For example, when I played earlier with piccolo trumpet, Vivaldi Double Concerto, it was fast, it was, brilliant. And since a few years, I love to play it on Baroque trumpet, and it's much slower, it's just sound. It's a totally different interpretation, and that is, I think, important to tell the young people, and that's difficult for them because they know the recordings of Maurice, of Reinhard Friedrich, and all of the modern players, and then they want to play the same on Baroque trumpet. And that does not really work, or it works, but it's not the idea of the Baroque trumpet. And that's, I think, our tell them that it's a different way of making music.
I think the same very much applies to Haydn and Hummel with the key trumpet too. The tempi, really, and the forensics of the instrument are the perfect guide for the how to make that music work the best.
Yep.
The composers were always idiomatic for the instrument, so.
It does the same thing with the low F trumpets too. I mean, consider orchestral repertoire on what we play it on now and low F trumpet. I mean, no comparison.
Yeah.
Anna, do you have your hand up?
I think I just wanted to mention before, Friedemann mentioned Ralph Bryant. He was a very dear colleague of mine, and but he played really, really good natural trumpet or Baroque trumpet. And I don't know if anybody knows of the recording. I was looking at my old recordings the other day, and I have a recording of Ed and Ralph Bryant playing the Vivaldi Concerto. And exactly what you were saying, people are used to on the modern trumpet hearing it taken so quickly, but it's a completely different piece if played on the Baroque trumpet and at a slower tempo. So it just gives a completely different feel to the whole piece. I think I've just about said, and Friedemann basically took every word out of my mouth before talking about students. These days, the students will come and think that, it's okay to pick the instrument up and they'll go straight to playing clarino playing. And I think that you can really underestimate the value of actually learning the instrument correctly. And I was very pleased to be able, in my early days, to be able to have the time to actually get into the instrument, to get to feel it. And it becomes a part of you. And after that, then it is a completely different thing. So that's what I think lacks, is the impatience. But I think that people want to start earning money straight away, and instead of just trying to go more into the depths of playing the instrument.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. I mean, one of the problems I think I had early on was that coming back to Australia after living in Europe and the UK was that, of course, not that many people were playing the Baroque trumpet back in Australia, talking in the late 90s or whatever. And so that when, even though I hadn't had a huge amount of experience, but it just meant any time a concert came up that they wanted to use period instruments for, with Magnificat, B minor Mass, Brandenburg 2, I had to play it. So I didn't get the luxury of playing principale parts and second trumpet parts, just to get that, good and massive experience before I stepped up to play the hard stuff. And in hindsight, I wish I'd done that, because I think it might have made some of those earlier experiences a lot less scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But of course, if you do it and you survive, then it's okay,
When I started, I was playing in two modern orchestras and a brass quintet. And I started playing when I was, I guess, about 25 years old. And I sold all my modern trumpets except for my Mount Vernon B flat, because that's what I wanted to do. And then, 10 years later, I started having to buy back all those trumpets at 3 times the price I sold them for. But I that's all I wanted to do, is just play Baroque trumpet. So I'd sold everything except for and I still have the Mount Vernon B flat too. But that's how I sort of just dove right into it. And it does, and I do find, like Anna and Friedemann were saying, that they just want to start making money. They just think it's another trumpet, just like playing piccolo trumpet or just like playing flugelhorn, that they're immediately going to get work doing it. And it's, it's not that I think that they should pay their dues, but I think they should pay their dues as far as getting into the music and actually learning about the music, not just picking up another instrument and playing it the same way they play their piccolo trumpet.
Yeah. I think many young players also don't play on a modern on a Baroque mouthpiece.
No.
So I think that's one of the most important things, and to have the correct sound as well. I was fortunate also to have I met the old Ecker and Reini, but then later on Reini Ecker took over, and when I was in Basel, he made me he didn't actually make me a mouthpiece, he made another student a mouthpiece. The student threw it away, and I picked it up, and I've been playing that since. But anyway, it's still the same mouthpiece, but he made different rims, because I've, through choice, I've always mixed modern and Baroque trumpet, and also teaching. And then, he made me the same mouthpiece, but with a flat rim, a flat screw-on rim, and that works well, because I can go very quickly between modern and Baroque mouthpiece.
Well, I always notice in November how many modern players are playing Baroque trumpet, because they order those Egger modern mouthpiece adapters from me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I always make sure I have about 20 of them in stock in November, because they think they can go play Messiah, and the next thing they know, oh, God, I got to use my mouthpiece. And I always run out of those adapters every year. So.
Yeah. For me.
Good, but yeah.
Gabrieli?
Yeah. For me, the question is, which common problem with young students with Baroque trumpet? What I see, they often try to play the piece, but they accumulate in the body a lot of tensions, and they don't care the sound in the middle, in the low, and they have no idea of singing melody in the mind. So I see they are maybe sometimes they fight with the trumpet. It's not extension of the body or like singing. So the goal for me is to have a sound that it can fluent, and still the Friedemann Immer sound is the example for me. So and this kind of attitude for me is important. And so for me is I work with the body position and posture, and feel the shoulders and abdomen, and feel the body, and avoid the tensions if possible. Also for me is very good to transpose the teaching of Arnold Jacobs with the Baroque trumpet, so wind and song. So this kind of thing I see with students. My students normally in Italy come after the modern trumpet, so they have the tendency to have the same attitude, to play maybe with force or with some high pressure in the high notes. So I try to make them understand this kind of approach that was very important for me.
Great. So we've mentioned a lot of the sort of pitfalls and problems with starting Baroque trumpet. I'd like to maybe ask a question about some of the positives. What are the advantages of some? What are the advantages on modern trumpet playing? Why might someone who wants to play modern trumpet, wants to play in a modern orchestra, wants to be a modern soloist, what advantages do they have from learning period instruments, specifically the Baroque trumpet?
Pitch. They can hear the pitches before they have to play them. Even easier if you can do it without buttons. You can definitely do it with buttons. That's what I find. That, you know, also an approach to the core of the sound is something else that you can achieve by playing the Baroque trumpet and then playing modern trumpet. It just, everything seems to be easier because you've got a relative pitch in your head for something without any buttons to help you, and then you add the buttons and it's, you know, like you have 9 natural trumpets or whatever. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's basically the short answer. You hit the nail on the head there, Josh. What you've got is the 3 buttons, but you've got 7 natural trumpets rolled into one instrument. So if you're not thinking about playing natural trumpet, when you approach the modern instrument, you're kind of defeating the purpose of what the instrument really is. It's evolved out of, you know, a length of tube. And, I never heard, of course, all we're concerned with a lot of the times is flexibility on the natural trumpet and how we get around the instrument. But I never heard one great player in the world with bad flexibility. You know, it can't work. So, but I think for a lot of students growing up and learning through band programs and this sort of stuff and sort of repetitious teaching goes on, all that sort of stuff, it becomes very viscerally about what this hand's doing. And even that, you know, when you look at someone when they're struggling on a trumpet, inevitably the claw is in action, which just, you know, like Gabrieli was saying, it causes tension everywhere. So I think from a posture point of view as well, the Baroque trumpet can really open the chest and the shoulders and promotes really excellent breathing. Of course, you have a bore size, which is a little smaller, but you have double the length of tube, so you have to support really well. The instrument won't work if you're forcing the high register. So all these things are directly applicable to the modern trumpet, and you'll become more efficient and more effective, and your stamina will improve because you're using less energy all the time. Yeah, all that stuff, all the good things.
I totally agree with the efficiency thing, because you can, and I know from me playing and my students, you can force a modern trumpet to play almost anything. If things aren't really working, you can make it work. And to me, the Baroque trumpet just teaches you more efficiency. And if you can't make it work on Baroque trumpet, if everything's not working, everything has to work right, and it teaches you how to make things work right, I think.
That's important what Barry says. When I play a B minor mass, for example, on Baroque trumpet, and I'm in quite good shape, I can play it 2 times. And on piccolo trumpet, okay, I don't play so much piccolo now, but it's hard work. Okay, it's a half tone higher, but that's not the problem. I think the technical thing is you learn a lot of technical things from the Baroque trumpet, but I think another thing is also very important. When we play Baroque trumpet, we learn more what the composer wanted to say with this music, because a composer composed for this instrument. They composed for the Baroque trumpet and for natural trumpet, Baroque trumpet, for this long instrument with good mouthpiece, with good measurement, with good bells and everything, and not for the tiny short piccolo trumpets. They are very funny instruments. They are nice to play, but the idea of music we learn more from the original instrument, or better, the period instruments. The English word is much better than the German word. This we can learn when we play a Bach cantata, by example. Always when, I remember one short story, sorry, I must tell this. We recorded with Hanako this cantata, I think it's 130, with the fight between Michael and the dragon. And it's for 3 trumpets, timpanis, bass singer, and continuo. And it's an
It's hard.
It's an extremely hard thing, and in the last third of this, it's very high, only these lying notes, and it's the chord you play there is F sharp, A, C. And the engineer said to Harnoncourt, this is out of tune, you can't use it. We can't use it, it's out of tune. And then Harnoncourt said, look at the text. The text says it's cruel, and it has to be out of tune there. This is something what you only can make or you only can hear and feel on the Baroque instruments, and this you can learn also when you later play modern trumpet. It's a different music, and that's beside the technical thing. That's for me very important to learn what the music says, how the music is, and also when you play, by example, Hummel Concerto, the third movement is always on the horse to Laramie. It's impossible to play on a key trumpet in this tempo. It's much lower, and then you learn what Hummel, Bach, and who else Purcell wanted to say with this music.
Right. Hey, Friedemann, I had to play the Cantata 130, but in D last year. That was tough. Really tough. In D, it was very difficult.
Can I say one short thing about the advantages of playing the natural trumpet for the modern trumpet? I think that it teaches us a lot about the air, more like when a singer uses the air, and it's in fact it's sort of like singing. I quite often find that if you're struggling to go on to play a note, all you have to do is add a little bit more support, and the note changes. And that's something which, of course, we should be doing with playing the modern trumpet, but we forget because we have the valves which are going to help us out. Or playing the piccolo trumpet, we have the harmonics which are further apart. So I think that we have to. It's more like, as I said, it's more like singing, and that helps a lot. And by playing the natural trumpet, I think that it's like walking on a tightrope. Without a wire, and when we put on the wire, then we play the modern trumpet by putting on the wire, then it's so much safer. So I think it's a great thing to learn, and to have that comparison.
The other thing I'd like to add, if I might, Anna, is in terms of the repertoire with the Baroque trumpet, it gives us such wonderful out-and-out musical opportunities to work with great singers, and with all the cantatas and all the arias, and when you work with really great singers, and also ties into what Friedemann's saying, you can't understand the right way to play anything without learning the text, learning the emotion and the proper kind of. It's a total governance over the music, and I think a lot of modern trumpet players can often overlook that. And it's very easy to overlook that because, particularly people, Western tradition, it's a more of an orchestral training that we're given traditionally and things like that early on, or whatever. And, so they approach Baroque repertoire pretty much, the great players don't do it, but there's a lot of note getting that goes on, and then they're happy with how that sounds, and that's fine. But it's only when you really work with these great singers and great other instrumentalists on the early instruments, but particularly in the solo arias, if you get to play, Handel or, the Eternal Source of Light Divine, or one of these beautiful arias, it's really, and not necessarily with a soprano, but with an alto, as it should be, you really do realize a lot of great things about the Baroque trumpet, and within the Baroque trumpet, the incredible amount of colors that instrument can make, because, of course, it doesn't just have one sound. It has all the sounds. It has twice as many harmonics as the modern trumpet for a start. So I think it's very important that we always have that in mind. And then if that permeates all your playing, you come back to the modern trumpet, and I think you know, really, I listen to my piccolo trumpet playing that I used to do a lot of when I was young. And I listen to, I rarely have to do it these days, but if I play piccolo trumpet now, I really don't recognize the playing very much because it's been so affected by the approach to the Baroque trumpet. And I hope that's in a good way.
Yeah. But about what John said, one thing I've noticed as far as students in this country, anyways, I don't know if it's this way in Europe, is temperament. I mean, I do a lot of master classes at big music schools here in the States, and they mention temperament, and trumpet players have never heard of a temperament. They don't know what it is. And I think that's another part, as far as John was talking about color of the instrument and just the color of the temperament, and Friedemann was talking about everything's not supposed to be beautiful. I mean, the intonation is supposed to be funky sometimes. And conductors here need to learn that too, not just the trumpet players. But I think that's something that's really lacking in our schools here in this country anyways.
Well, case in point, Jason and I did some recording a couple of years ago, and he had a 3-hole trumpet, I had a 4-hole trumpet, and we were trying to tune the B flats in the G minor. Mm-hmm. And I said, and he said, well, on this trumpet, it's a little low. I said, no, great, let's let it be low, because that's the color of the music. He's gone into G minor for that reason, and it should be a bit crunchy, you know. And
yep. Mm-hmm.
And Friedemann recorded a lovely Vavinovsky piece, I think it was, with the guys from Kentucky on another project we did, and it goes into the G minor, and beautifully the sound quality on his B flats. I really, really admired that.
Yeah. Let me go back to another question which we went through before, just quickly, about influences. And I was very fortunate to work with Emma Kirkby and in Jacques at Gott in Cantata 51, and talking about how that taught me about the how to play the modern trumpet as well. Playing on the natural trumpet, you cannot reproduce any near the musical effect if you're playing on the piccolo trumpet or any other modern instrument. You don't have that rich sound of the principale register, and then going up into the high register, playing duos with soprano. And she did that fantastically. It was a real pleasure doing that, but I learnt so much from her as well. So that having that contrast in the low register, which you only get from playing the natural trumpet, and then going to play in the high register lightly and with that sort of sound. So therefore that also displays the difference between the natural trumpet and the piccolo trumpet, but you can try and imitate that when you are playing the piccolo trumpet.
Great. We have a bunch of questions on. Oh, Friedemann, go ahead.
Just one short thing. I once recorded Telemann Tafelmusik with Freiburg Baroque Orchestra, and when I hear this now, this is you all know the piece. It's mainly for trumpet, oboe, and strings. And when I listen to this now, in some places I don't recognize if the trumpet is playing or the oboe is playing, because it's a very, very close sound. It's on modern instruments, it's different, totally different. And on Baroque instruments, it's very close to sound. And that's the idea of the composer, of course, but also the instrument. For me, it's much more interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great. Well, we have a bunch of questions from our Facebook Live audience I'm eager to get to, but there's one question I have to ask that I haven't gotten to yet. This is the one hot button question everyone's dying to hear our answers for. And I've spoken with many of you individually about where you feel, but I'd just love to hear a little casual conversation. How do you feel, or do you feel there's any historical evidence that actual Baroque trumpet players in the 17th and 18th centuries ever used holes? Do you see any evidence for that? What's your feeling about that, and maybe any experimentation they would have used?
Can you ask the question again?
Sure. Do you think actual Baroque trumpet players from the 17th and 18th century, if any of them experimented using holes in their instruments? We know that the 3- and 4-hole systems we use today are modern innovations. But do we feel that, any of you feel that during the time period players may have actually used them or not.
I think there's no doubt that they experimented with them. I don't think they were very widely used, because otherwise you'd find more examples of those. But the idea that they wouldn't have tried when you have oboes with holes and you have flutes and recorders with holes seems a bit far-fetched, that they would not have tried to do something. So,
yeah, exactly. There's no doubt that there's evidence that there was experiments taken, but in terms of what's left over, and of course one argument, and it shouldn't be an argument because I always like to keep a very open mind. Obviously I wasn't there, so I can't say, I never say I know anything definitively. All I could say ever is that I can give an educated guess on the things that I have discovered about it from speaking to all the right people and going to all the museums and things. If you look at who would have benefited from using those instruments. Now, after World War I, we had about 1% of instruments remaining from the High Baroque period. After World War II, we had even a small percentage of that 1% remaining, okay? And
the rest of the whole cabinet.
Yeah, that's right. And if you look at the way the guild systems worked, especially in continental, because the guilds weren't in England, but if they're in continental Europe, if you look the way that worked, let's say you had 16 trumpet players, you might have had 1 out of 16 that could have utilized that the most effectively. The rest of the players wouldn't need to use it. So I mean, it's, you know, and even then we might have been talking about the use of, say, 1 hole maybe, if you want to go down that road. So I mean, so the argument, of course, is, well, why aren't there any of these instruments remaining? Well, I think I've explained why. It's for the same reason there aren't many there's no flat trumpets remaining. For the same reason, you know, there's not lots of examples of other instruments remaining. But you know, I think it pays to keep a very open mind with these things. I mean, we can look at the trumpet they found in St. James Palace. There's a Shaw enharmonic trumpet, which had 4 holes covered by 4 sleeves and 4 crooks matching. That's a 1-hole system, and that's from the late 1770s, something like that, I think. And see, that's already technology on top of technology. So we already have an evolution to an instrument on that point that we do have. So that's, and then of course we have anecdotal evidence as well through guys like Mitzler, who Altenberg talks about, and I mean Altenberg himself talks about in his book, Oriental trumpet players using holes, whatever instrument that is, I don't know. But also, you know, you had the stadpfeifers, sometimes or the town pipers or whatever you want to refer to them as, who would play both cornetto and trumpet. In some examples, I think that was a rarity. But I know Gottfried Reicher's possessions, when he died, they found zincs and trumpets and everything else. So yeah, I mean, I would find it very unusual that if they hadn't have at some point at least experimented. I mean, even talking about keyed instruments going back to as early as experiments as 1750. So, you know, to think that there weren't already instruments with holes or the covering of a leather slider, I think, is one that gets discussed and things like that. But to say it was in common use, I think, no, definitely not.
Friedemann, you had your hand up?
I think, and I'm nearly absolutely sure, that the normal instrument at that time, until really late 18th century, was the trumpet without holes. Because if you have the Charles Burney, where he says about Handel's birthday concert from 1784, where the trumpet player played the F out of tune, and a lot of things, and all the books say that you have to drive the notes, you have to lift them down or up. And it was a question of Zünfte or unions at that time. And I think it was, the normal instrument was really without any ventals. But there is one source, not many people know about this. There is one source in the Mitzler books. It says that there was a trumpet, the German word is eine unbelöcherte und ohne Zug versehene Trompete. So it's a trumpet without holes and a trumpet without slide. So, and this was from between 1741 and 1743. This is by a man called Hill or Hillen, and it's a sort of magazine like Scientific American in that time. And this man writes about he writes about intervals. And as an example, he says a trumpet without slide and a trumpet without holes has these intervals. And so, and if he writes this, there must have been a trumpet with holes, because there was also a trumpet with slide. But I think, and that also Altenburg writes, the idea was a little different. The idea was not to play the upper register in tune, because they could do this. They have been fantastic players, and we have at least one player today, or a few players. The first who played perfect in tune was Don Smithers, who is still living. He is not in good shape, but he's okay. And then, of course, Jean-François Madoff is playing perfect without any holes. And this was a normal thing. But the holes in this mid-slot, I call it mid-slot trumpet, I think it was for the low register, because they wanted to play a scale in the low register. And I tried with Egger, it's not finished yet, but I tried to make a trumpet with two holes where you can play the low octave every diatonic scale, also with a little bending, you can play a chromatic scale there. And I think this is the idea of the trumpet with holes in the 1740s. It's just an idea, and there is nothing, I'm not sure if this is right, but I think, to say it again, the normal instrument was without holes, and if there was an instrument with holes, it was mainly for the lower register.
That's a very interesting bit of information. I mean, I knew about this document, but it's nice to hear, because it's written in Old German, right? So it's nice to hear, you personally describe that, and I refer back to keeping an open mind, because all we can use is our best judgment and try and piece these things together. I don't think when it comes to modern playing, and people want to be very black and white on these topics, and as I said, I don't think we can be totally close-minded to these things, but definitely I think we agree that the most obvious trumpet of the time had no holes, and there are a few references to things, but without seeing these actual instruments, it's very hard to know what road to go down if you're trying to talk about exact historical precedent or the organology of the instruments.
Great. Anyone else want to add in on this somewhat difficult topic? Great, thanks. I learned a lot just hearing you guys speak about this. So we had a lot of questions. We won't have time for all of them, but I'll go through a couple of them, try to go through them as the order they were presented. The first is Neil Grindstaff, who's actually one of my students at the University of Kentucky. He says, with this panel being from people from all over the world, he would like to ask, do you feel like the public view of period music is different in your home country versus other places that you have visited?
Excuse me, can you repeat? I didn't hear well. Please,
sure.
Thank you.
Do you feel like early music is viewed differently in Italy than it is in other parts of the world? Do you think your home country is, what are some differences in the early music scene in your country and then other places around the world?
Well, I think here in the States, we've been 10 years behind Europe. Now, most of the groups, I think, do play with period instruments. When I first started, nobody hardly did. And I think it was more common in Europe than it was here.
Yeah, same in Australia too. I think Anna was really one of the first pioneers for Baroque trumpet in Australia. And then obviously she moved to Switzerland and then finally Aachen in Germany. But it's really only been, I'd say, the last 10 years or so that, you wouldn't find, Baroque pieces being performed on piccolo trumpet. Now it's almost all exclusively Baroque trumpet everywhere.
The next question we have is actually a hole versus no hole question, which is perfect because we just answered that. The question after that is from Noah Miller, and she asks, if one is to start playing Baroque trumpet, do we recommend a beginner model or something, or should a student start right with like buying a new Egger? What should someone start on if they're going to buy a trumpet? Josh?
Well, I can tell you, I've worked a little bit, as Gabrieli has done too, with Brass for Beginners. They have a very economical trumpet. It doesn't look like, you know, an original instrument, but if someone really wants to get into it and start and not spend a whole bunch of money, they're like less than $1,000 US, and they play remarkably well for what they are. I mean, it's a modern trumpet bell and it's not historically made or anything, but it plays very well and it's very in tune. And I recorded a little video a couple of weeks ago of, they sent me crooks for F trumpet. And I played the last couple of measures of Brandenburg on it after having it for about 20 minutes. And it plays remarkably well. And, you know, it really depends on how serious the student is. If they know that's what they want to do. Like when I sold all my modern trumpets to buy Baroque trumpets, then they might not want something like that. But if they want to see if they get into it and they have the ability to play in the upper register and get started, I think a cheaper model is a good idea before you go out and, you know, spend thousands of dollars on a really good horn. But you know, that's just me, because I don't make any money from them or anything, but they send me stuff and I test it and I tell them if the holes are in the right place and things. But they play. I was unbelievably amazed at how easily they played in tune. Not necessarily the wonderful sound that you get from, you know, an Egger or a Norwich or a Tomes or whatever everybody else is using, but to start and to learn how the finger holes work, if you want to learn 4-hole trumpet, it's one option that I highly recommend for someone starting out.
Yes, the problem with the normal Baroque trumpet, the cheap Baroque trumpet, often are not in tune, the normal one. So it's better not to play out of tune trumpet because it's very bad. So this solution with this student trumpet, you said this. I tried this trumpet also. So it's good to play with this trumpet. If you really decide it is your life to play the Baroque trumpet, you can buy a good one. Sure. Avoid some used instrument Baroque trumpet because I so often out of tune and so is very bad to play this kind of instrument if out of tune. Yeah.
Friedemann, you had your hand up?
I think it's always a question of money. If you have enough money, it's the best to buy a good instrument because then it's easier to play. They play better, they work better. It's the same like when you start to drive a car. It's much more fun to drive a Ferrari or a Porsche than an old Ford Fiesta also. But the other thing is if you buy not a third or fourth class trumpet, but a second class trumpet, the thing is it doesn't it's not losing a lot of value because there are only a very, very few used trumpets on the market. And if you buy a trumpet in Germany for a 3-hole trumpet with all the crooks you need, with the 4 crooks for €2,000, you play it for 1 year and then you buy another one for 4,000. Then you can sell the old one for 1.8. So you lose just a little money. It's not like with a computer also, by example. And if you have enough money, it's always better to buy a good instrument. But if not, the best is ask your teacher that she or he should choose an instrument with you, and that's the best.
Friedemann, two points. We're trumpet players. We only buy trumpets. We never sell them. They just keep accumulating in your house until you have to get a bigger house. And secondly, I'm working with Blackburn and Pickett brass in Lexington, where Jason actually is, and we're coming up with a new Baroque trumpet. So I think for the students, they should only buy this trumpet from now on, all of them. Yes.
Anna?
I'd say just something quickly. I think that, I don't know how it is in the States or in Australia or anywhere, but in most universities now in Germany, I might be wrong, but from what I hear from my colleagues, that most people teach Baroque trumpet. At least somebody, they might not be as very specialized, but at least they have a chance to learn Baroque trumpet. And usually, for instance, where I am, we have 4 trumpets, and in Wuppertal, where there are a set of 3, I think 4 maybe. I don't know, Friedemann in Cologne, there must be some instruments available. But I think that it would be advisable, first of all, for the student, particularly, to try and borrow an instrument, or maybe from the teacher first, or if they're not available through the university, and then try it, because I don't think there's any other instrument that hangs on the wall as much as a Baroque trumpet.
Great. I think we'll do one final question from the Facebook audience, and then we'll kind of wrap things up here. You guys have had great stamina through all these questions. The question comes from Nathaniel Wood. It's a question about the flat trumpets that we were talking about earlier. He says, speaking of flat trumpets, I had been basing flat trumpets I build largely on Frank Thome's model, but I am currently completely revising the concept after rereading the Talbot more closely. What thoughts do you all have on flat trumpets? What design features are important in a flat trumpet beyond good intonation and response? Where do you think previous reconstructions could be improved?
All right, I'm looking at a couple of flat trumpets in my room here now that I've made myself with a good friend of mine, and what I think the mistake people make is generally just fixing them in one pitch. So by that I mean, they weren't all like trumpet in C, trumpet in D, or whatever. Actually, for some of the repertoire, like say Daniel Purcell Symphony for Flat Trumpets, or the Henry Purcell, the funeral music procession stuff. The top part works best on an E flat flat trumpet. Just puts all the positions in a better place, particularly in the canzona. So that's one thing to consider about, is how the instrument's pitched. Based on the Talbot description, I think for the playability for the people concerned, whether it's done exactly as the Talbot description is, or perhaps in mirror image of it, depending on, how closely you want to adhere to the historical factors. But sometimes, for the playability of the instrument, people can have one preference or the other about how they want the slide to, which side they want it on or whatever. And I don't think that's a big deal. Also, I think you've got to realize too that instrument, or the whole slide trumpet tradition within the UK, it went on for such a long time, a lot longer time than people realize. So it goes well back into the 17th century, early 17th century, and probably back into the 16th century. And then I think the last time we see anything for the flat trumpet was actually quite late. Well, that Talbot description, I think, from around about 1700 or something like that. I can't quite remember. And then there's only a gap of about 80 years until we get the English slide trumpet, which is essentially the same instrument in a slightly different format. But anyway, that's getting slightly off topic. But in terms of the design, I think it also helps to not have the bell too far away from the player, if possible. Use the iconography that we have to try and come up with the best, the best result that we can have. But past that, I can't really think of many ways. Just obviously, smaller bore size is good. I think some of the bore sizes get a little bit large sometimes. But Nathaniel, I'm sure you'll do a wonderful job with whatever you're doing. I'm sure it'll be awesome.
Great. Well, thanks to all of you for giving up so much of your time, especially John. I know it's like 6 a.m. there in Australia right now. I see a few comments from some Australians that we know in common. So they actually got up super early to watch this. So
Big shout out to all the Aussies.
that's incredible. So it's almost Tuesday for the Europeans, I guess, here, as it's almost midnight there. I get to go have dinner here, so it's a perfect time. So thank you for catering toward the American schedule for this. The final question I have for everyone is, if anyone out there is watching and would like to get in touch with you directly, what's the best way that someone out there on Facebook can reach you and contact you?
Josh Cohen, JoshCohenTrumba1.com.
And mine's Barry at BaroqueTrumpet.com, or just go to the BaroqueTrumpet.com website.
Yeah, me by Facebook is fine.
For me, it's better via mail. It's Friedemann, like German way of writing, Friedemann.immer@web.de, or Facebook.
For me, it's through Facebook's great, or you can go to johnfostertrumpet.com and get me through the website.
Anna?
For me, it's Facebook is fine, or Anna Freeman, all small, Anna Freeman 2138@hotmail.com.
Great. I think everyone spoke. Mike, you can also reach me through Facebook, or my contact information you can easily find on the University of Kentucky School of Music website. My personal email is jdovel, JDOVEL, @gmail.com. Thanks to everyone. I learned so much. It was great to see everyone, especially during this crazy kind of quarantine time. We're all stuck. It was great to get together. So good night to our European friends. Good morning to
We'll
our
get together in
friends.
person as soon as this is over, I think.
Yeah,
So.
let's all get together in person and do something. Friedemann, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I want to say a very, very big thank you, Jason, for that you organized this. Thank you very much. It was big fun for us, I think for all of us. And I hope we'll do this again sometime soon.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.